Welcome to Beauty in Stories. This is a space where short, meaningful tales invite us to explore life's deep lessons and the beauty of emotions. Each story becomes a journey to listen, reflect, and rediscover values that are often overlooked in the busyness of life. Join us as we uncover inspiration, joy, and connection in these stories every day. And now, let's dive into today's story, A Mother's Choice. From a young age, I often secretly envied my mother's beauty and all that she had achieved. But when she became paralyzed at the age of 31 due to a spinal tumor, our lives changed completely. At that time, I was only 10 years old. It was as though, overnight, she woke up to find herself unable to move, lying immobile on her bed. As a child, I couldn't fully grasp the bitter irony of the term benign tumor, but it certainly wasn't benign for my mother. Before that, my mother was always cheerful, sociable, and loved having guests over. She would spend hours preparing cold cuts and arranging fresh flowers, while everyone else was dancing merrily. She would be bustling around, making sure the guests had a place to sleep. My mother loved to dance. To this day, I still remember the beautiful evening gown she wore, a black dress and a tie-up top that highlighted her flowing golden hair. When she brought home a pair of black high-heeled shoes, I was as excited as she was. That evening, I can't exaggerate, my mother was the most beautiful woman in the world. I believe there was nothing my mother couldn't do. She played tennis, having won a prize in college. Sewed clothes, she made all our clothes herself. Took photographs, she won a national contest. Wrote, she ran a column in the newspaper. And cooked, especially Spanish dishes for my father. Now, when she could no longer do any of those things, she faced her illness with the same courage and determination. Words like disability and physical therapy became part of the unfamiliar world we had entered. Gradually, I learned how to take care of her, instead of the other way around. Pushing her wheelchair into the kitchen became a routine. She taught me the art of carving carrots and potatoes, and how to season a piece of roast beef with fresh garlic, salt, and butter to make it delicious. The first time I heard about using a cane, I immediately protested. I don't want my beautiful mother using a cane. But my mother gently replied,
"Would you rather I use a cane, or never walk again?"
Every achievement my mother made was a milestone for both of us, using an electric typewriter, driving with automatic controls, and earning a master's degree through a special program. My mother researched everything about disabilities and even started a support group called the Disabled Family. One day, she took me and my brothers to one of the group's meetings. I had never seen so many disabled people in one place. Afterward, I became more reflective, realizing how fortunate we were. Many others were in far worse situations. My mother even took us to meet people with cerebral palsy. And we were no longer shocked. She taught us how to communicate with people with intellectual disabilities. Often, they were more endearing than some so-called normal people. My father always loved and supported my mother. I thought my mother always accepted her circumstances with optimism and calm. So I rarely felt sadness or resentment about it. But I will never forget the day when that self-satisfaction in me dissolved like soap bubbles. It was at a family party when I was a teenager. Just as the image of my mother dancing in her evening gown and high heels began to fade from my subconscious, I suddenly saw her sitting outside the party, smiling as she watched me and my friends dance. My heart tightened at the contrast between her disability and her smile. Then, the image of my mother dancing with grace and radiance came rushing back to me. I wondered if my mother felt the same as I did. Unconsciously, I walked over to her. And though her lips were smiling, I saw tears welling up in her eyes. I ran to my room, buried my face in my pillow, and sobbed. From that moment, I felt the spiritual strength of my mother, her willingness to sacrifice the things she loved. As I grew older, I worked in a prison rehabilitation environment. And my mother loved helping me. She offered to teach creative writing to my students. Even when she could no longer visit the prison, she frequently wrote letters to them. One day, she asked me to send a letter to a prisoner named Wayman. I vaguely thought I was about to learn something new about my mother. So I asked her if I could read the letter first. She agreed. The letter read,
Dear Mr. Wayman, I have thought a lot about your letter. You mentioned that life behind bars is harsh. I completely understand. But when you say that I cannot imagine what it's like to live confined, I must disagree. Wayman, there are many types of freedom, and many kinds of prisons. Sometimes, we create our own prisons. At 31, I suddenly lost the ability to walk. I felt like the ground had crumbled beneath my feet. My mind was preoccupied with the thought that I would be trapped in my body for the rest of my life, no longer able to walk, dance, or hold my children in my arms. It took me a long time to accept my condition, to try not to drown in sorrow. Many times I asked myself whether life was still worth living, haunted by the words imprisonment and despairing over the things I had lost. But one day, I realized that I still had the power to choose. Should I smile or cry when I see my children? Should I become an exemplary mother or a mother who withers in her children's minds? Should I curse or pray to God for strength, relying on my faith? I decided that as long as I live, I must keep trying, I must act positively, I must expand my mental boundaries to compensate for the physical limitations. There are many kinds of freedom. Wayman, when we lose one freedom, we simply have to seek another. You can look at the gloomy sky or the beautiful horizon through the bars. You can be a shining example for the younger generation or sink into a life with the bad. In some ways, we share the same fate. Mr. Wayman.
After reading the letter, I realized that the things I had once taken for granted had become a hidden and incredibly powerful source of motivation. Reflection. The story of the resilient mother is not just a journey of overcoming adversity, but also a profound lesson in inner strength and acceptance. Despite being struck by a debilitating illness, she not only accepted her fate but found ways to rise above it, continuing to live positively and inspire her children. The greatest lesson this story offers is the importance of accepting our circumstances, seeking new opportunities in the face of challenges, and knowing how to choose our attitude toward life. Every hardship or trial can become an opportunity to discover our hidden strengths and build inner resilience. Life is not always easy, but how we face it will determine the quality and meaning of our lives. Thank you for joining Beauty in Stories for today's tale. I hope these moments have brought you meaningful insights and inspiration. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, so you won't miss any upcoming stories. See you in the next one.
Goodbye!